I'd probably say that like many people who grew up in like homes of, like single parents who worked, night shift or whatever, what really raised me and gave me a lot of guidance in life was watching, late night comedy, uh, talk shows such as especially probably Leno and Conan O'Brien. And this was the Conan O'Brien of the late 90s and early 2000s. So I don't think he's dramatically different from Conan O'Brien today in terms of his technique or anything, but the content has changed. He was never a very political, comedian. I think a lot of the other people that have been on lately have been very politicized when before, they were pretty good, a lot of them. And I don't think it's just in late night comedy, it's in comedy in general. There's a lot of politicized messages spreading among all of these, comedians and creators. Now, the same thing, music. I would probably say I really started to branch out my musical tastes, from 1996 onward. The Follow the Leader album by Korn was very subtly political and social commentary about education and about raising children and about abuse and stuff like that. That was the first album that I listened to that really had me thinking. And I was like 11 years old, maybe 10 years old, that type of age. And since then, you know, I've had like a lot of other tastes that have come into. I don't really listen to Korn anymore, although I still think they're an amazing band. But what's different from bands like that, like Korn, like Deftones, Tool, um, some of the like Garth Brooks country people, and AC/DC, is that the focus was always, always, always on making music in order to, stay true to their sound, as opposed to staying true to some sort of stylistic trend going on in society. And I have many debates with my friend Super Joe about what that really means. And what's so awful is that when you have a president in power, there's a political lightning rod for the arts community, that suddenly you get all of these bands that grow the biggest hard on for politics that you can get. I remember under President Bush, Green Day suddenly became, like the MC5. Suddenly, after so many years, they didn't have shit to say about President Clinton, and they started criticizing President Bush. Now I'm fine with them criticizing President Bush, but they were as corporatized as you could get. And I think the American Idiot album was actually, I don't remember which album of it was. Green Day album target promotion. Let's see if I can even find it. Um, I mean, they sold their autobiography or whatever it was, their authorized biography, Green Day FAQ. All that's left to know about the world's most popular punk band. That's not something a punk band does, and it was a disgrace. And in my mind, Green Day has returned to being the same piece of shit band that people have all, Green Day's never been a pure punk band. Maybe in the early days, while they were not yet signed to a label, but they've never had that type of lifestyle the way that the Sex Pistols did, the way that even Patti Smith, the what's that guy, Johnny Thunders, that they just became mainstream in the 90s, and then suddenly after 2000 they had this quote unquote political awakening. Okay, and I'm not trying to say that you shouldn't criticize the president. Incubus made a fantastic album where they were they were destroying President Bush on their album. It was. I know the single that was most famous from it was Megalomaniac. Let me look it up, see if I can find the name of the album. Megalomaniac. I think, yeah, it was probably Incubus. So it's from their Live in Japan. Oh no, it was Crow Left of the Murder, which was a very political album, but it was a very well made political album. And they were, and even though the message was it was the same thing, it was that Bush is Hitler and that the war in Iraq is human atrocity that knows no bounds. There's certain points where I think that they exaggerated, but the album was amazing, and they had a great deal of good, memorable songs from the album for that time. But it's been 14 years. Incubus hasn't really put together a ton of great material since then, which is unfortunate. And that brings me to some of the artists that have become political in the Trump era. Artists, I'm using the term loosely. I'm talking about comedians and music and musicians. Bruce Springsteen, for example. Sorry, but you've been screaming for years about the same bullshit, and you live in a mansion in New Jersey, and you're no longer an icon of the working class. Your songs are, your previous work is, but it's time for you to move out and stop pretending that you're the conscience of the American working class. Obviously, Bruce Springsteen campaigned for Hillary Clinton in 2016. The working class did not listen to him. The working class overwhelmingly rejected Hillary Clinton and voted for somebody who is the opposite of her. And he should recognize that people don't see him as the conscience of their their political thought anymore. It's over. He's in his 70s now, and he hasn't put out any amazing material since then. Now, Roger Waters is a guy I've already talked about on my live, on my streams and on my videos. So I think there's plenty of things to say about him, that he's become so committed to his politics that nobody cares about. When have you ever cared about Roger Waters' music? Well, they haven't released anything. He hasn't released anything important for, what is it, 34 years now since The Wall? 38 years. Roger Waters' albums have all been crap. He's been one of the shittiest solo artists ever. So I find it tremendously, baffling that people still pay attention to Roger Waters. Bruce Springsteen has produced some good content since the 80s, but again, I think it's been a while. And I'll focus for this era, the people who became political in the Trump era, on a number of people. You have, well, not all of them became political now, but you'll get my drift now. Now, Jay-Z had a successful album in the Trump era called 444, but Jay-Z, and I haven't listened to the album, so I'm not going to say that I don't like the album, and I don't like Jay-Z, so I'm the wrong person to comment on the quality of his music, which I'll admit. But I think Jay-Z as a person is one of the biggest con artists that there is. He's somebody who sells the black community on his vision of luxury and celebrity and fame. And what do they get in return? They get nothing. A lot of them become aspiring rappers because of people like Jay-Z. Well, to put it very simply, not everybody can be a guy who earns hundreds of millions of dollars, wins Grammys, marries Beyonce, and lives with political and social royalty. There can only be a few people like that. That's just the natural way of the world. So Jay-Z uses his street cred, which I think is By now, you know, he's moved on from that life. It's the equivalent of Bruce Springsteen, but the black hip hop equivalent of Bruce Springsteen. And it's over. Bruce Springsteen doesn't speak for the working class anymore. And I think I'm I'm waiting for the day when um, you know, young black Americans, you know, they have somebody who is the current voice of their you know, of their demographic, I guess. But maybe there is no such thing as the voice of an entire demographic, whether it's blacks or Mexicans or Russians or whatever. You have to have the problem that these people have created, people like Jay-Z and Bruce Springsteen, is that they create these albums with these intricately woven narratives within them that don't really encompass the experience of all the people in that community. Like these people that Bruce Springsteen sings about a lot in like Born in the USA. So sure, yeah, a lot of veterans did come from the Vietnam War, and they were you know, basically neglected and whatever. But some veterans weren't. Some veterans had a successful career after the Vietnam War. So by default, he can't have a song that encompasses the entire veteran community after the war. And you know, Bruce Springsteen, let me see how old he is. I think he was of draft age. I accidentally wrote Bring Springsteen, but whatever. Yeah, he was of draft age during the Vietnam War, and he didn't go. He didn't go. And you know, he's 68 years old now, and he's one of the greatest songwriters of his generation. But he's let the message go dry. It's the same message. It's the same thing I wrote in my piece a couple of days ago, that Jane Fonda and what's that guy, Tom Hayden, who was her ex-husband, they were spied on during the Vietnam War era, and now guess what? They supported Barack Obama, who was the biggest supporter of the surveillance state. So you can be as big of an icon as you want. If you betray the issues that got you to where you are, it's a serious problem. And you have to explain it. I mean, maybe if you had a change of heart, okay, it could be understood. If you now believe in a surveillance state, okay. Explain why is it you now believe in a surveillance state, whereas before you were being spied on by the NSA, and you know, you played the victim. Now there's other victims of the surveillance state. Don't you think that that's a little bit of a shoe on the other foot situation? So I've talked about Bruce Springsteen. I've talked about Jay-Z. Another political act would be this. I have U2 here, and they released this Songs of Experience album, which is apparently getting some heat because of their video where they show, you know, a bunch of Klansmen and Trump and whatever. Look, U2, they said in the past, they they said in the past that it was a mistake. Let me see if I can even find it. U2. I mean, they were criticizing George Bush heavily, and let me see here. Yeah, he was criticizing George Bush very heavily. And then you see here on My San Antonio, the premier website for local news, that he visited him on May 28th, 2017. This guy that he previously looked at as basically a war criminal and for neglecting the Katrina victims and whatever. You know, this is exactly what I'm talking about. People that you know, once you know the faces change, you know they sold albums in 2006 talking about George Bush. Now George Bush is out of power, so it's okay to shake hands with him and appear with him at his ranch in Crawford, Texas. And I'm not saying it is a problem, but when you've made so much money doing that, for me it wouldn't be a problem, because I've never really made tons of money off of criticizing George Bush. I'd probably meet him and ask him a few pointed questions. That's what had happened. I wouldn't be a dick about it. I wouldn't place a fake phone call while on stage like you two did, claiming that I'm trying to get through to George Bush. But that's really the type of behavior you're seeing here. You're seeing people that they're using politics as a marketing tool, and eventually, whether it's in 2020, if Donald Trump for some reason, let's say, loses election, or he doesn't, or he retires or whatever, after 2020, who's to say that some of these clowns won't like show up at his house and drink Chardonnay in his next to his gold toilet or whatever. There's no way to tell. I mean, these people have no commitment to their values. It's pretty much like a skin that they put on in their Xbox game or something, if I can use that metaphor. I'm not a real gamer, but I know that's what they say. So, this album, I think, is going to, now look, right now it does have positive reviews. I'm going to put on Metacritic. Okay, it has a 63 rating, which is decent based on critics, and it has a 7.0 rating for users. So it's not like it's awful. It's not like, or according to the critics, it's not like it's awful. And once again, I did not listen to this album yet, so maybe later I'll come back. I'll listen to these albums. I'm not a real fan of the U2's new stuff. I'm not a fan of Jay-Z's stuff at all. I think he sucks, so that's going to be painful if I listen to that, because I think he's a piece of shit. But on a personal level, I think he's garbage. But this album, I'm predicting, will not look like a very big element of their pantheon of music. Remember, in the 80s, they were getting, they basically got that John Lennon syndrome. They thought that they were gods because of Joshua Tree and The Unforgettable Fire, and what's the other one? War. And there was that album Rattle and Hum was when people thought they started to like go downhill, which I actually think Rattle and Hum is a pretty good album. But then you go to the 90s and they had Achtung Baby and Zuropa, when they switched it up and they started doing all this German stuff. And then it did start to fall apart a bit. They had an album in the 2000s. I don't even remember what it was called. That was okay. It's been a real downward slide for them, and they're using politics to prop up their aging selves. And they have enough money. I don't understand what the need is to continuously put out albums that I don't really see what's so special about them. And then you have Eminem, who's just being trashed by most people. Now, there are still more positive reviews than there are negative reviews of the album. But he's been the butt of jokes, both because of his slip of the tongue that maybe it was true that he goes on Grindr, which is a gay dating app or something. So maybe it's not because of the quality of the music that people are making fun of him. It's also because of his pathetic posturing. He had that bizarre freestyle, if it even was a freestyle, attacking Donald Trump. And he will become, his career, I think, will be the most damaged by this politicization. He's not that. Look, he came to the forefront when I was a kid. This was in 1999 or 2000, and his song "My Name Is," and then the subsequent songs. There was the of course there was the 8 Mile album, but there were ones "Without Me." Guess who's back? Guess who's back? Guess who's back? This guy was all about attacking political correctness, attacking censorship, being edgy, talking about how talking about themes that like child abuse and spousal abuse and violence and things like that. Now those were things that were first of all, there was a novelty that he was a white rapper that was not afraid to get really raw and uncut, as opposed to people like Vanilla Ice or um, there were the people from MC Search, whatever the guy's name was, from House of Pain. Those guys, I don't think he was from House of Pain, but whatever. A lot of those people, they would go a little far, and then they would come back. They didn't really want to upset the apple cart, because rap is racially identified with black people. Eminem changed that. He became the quintessential white rapper, and that was because he was raw and uncut enough that people of all races who liked hip hop would like his music, and he had a style of his own, and it was appreciated by people like Dr. J, who's still one of the best music producers in the history of hip hop. And then this change of his is really bizarre. I don't know what the motivation is. Maybe he thinks that he can't survive anymore with that old style of just winging it and talking talking as raw as possible, because obviously a lot of his lyrics and stated ideas are not, they're even less politically correct today in the era of the snowflake generation than they were in 2000 and 2001. But he's not going to have success being the clean social justice rapper or whatever it is that he does right now. It's going to be over if he continues to do this. Now, there are user reviews that are positive, and there are critical reviews that are positive, but he's his album sales, let's see how they are doing. I mean, so it did debut at #1. Okay, that's good for him. Um, but so we're going to talk about, they are going to continue to have some success because there's going to be people who are fans of his, but I don't think he's going to gain new fans in this way. And also, people are buying music less than they used to, and he's simply not as big of a cultural figure as he used to be. Now, there is going to be some success with this, and I'm not going to call him a failure because his album isn't as good as his previous ones. It's very common for people all over the industry to have that. But then let's move to, so we talked a lot about music. Let's talk about comedians now. There is the opposition with Jordan Klepper. How is it that a show goes one season? On Metacritic, there's only about let's see, 4 reviews, and 3 of them are mixed. Well, I'll tell you why. A lot of people are not willing to state their true feelings about the quality of a show, because they know that the opinions stated in the show are ones that they are supposed to agree with. So they're not going to really go out on a limb and attack somebody and then get attacked in turn because you're just butthurt because he's attacking Donald Trump or something. No, I think it should be possible to attack an artist, whether it's a musician or a comedian or whatever, based on the quality of their work. And Jordan Klepper's opposition is so artificial and contrived. And it's clearly, this is a guy, another one of these Daily Show alumni, just like Samantha Bee, just like Larry Wilmore, just like Colbert, just like who's that other guy? John Oliver. So you have all these people that they're putting out these shows, and they're trying to say, well, we are the voice of satire and criticism for the president. Let's not forget Saturday Night Live, and let's not forget the Daily Show itself with Trevor Noah. So those shows are, and I have friends who, they've been watching those shows for years with Jon Stewart. Even some, I remember going back to Craig Kilborn on the Daily Show, and they've been watching these shows for years, and they're like all about, how this is how some of them even share their news. They don't watch the actual news. They watch the satirical news on the Daily Show or on John Oliver, and that's not that's not really getting informed. That's kind of that would be like me sharing a clip from what's his name, Woody Allen's movie Bananas, to criticize Cuba, because that was a movie used to criticize Cuba. He satirized it. Okay, I've watched the movie. It's not that good of a movie, but you don't use a satirical representation of anything in order to for a debate. Okay, it's used in order to criticize for an audience that's in order to put a point across, and then after that you kind of have to go more in depth about it. So this thing with Jordan Klepper and Jim Jeffries, who's also got a show out. Look, those people, they have sold their soul for political expediency, and they are willing to take money from Comedy Central, which is a very politically biased network, and they're willing to say, oh, this is our work for the resistance. We're going to resist through our art on Comedy Central. Well, I'm sorry to tell those guys, there's a crowded field, and people can only watch so many shows. And while it may seem that your style is unique, the content isn't. And to some extent, your style is, again, another skin, just like the musicians who put on a skin. It's the anti-Bush skin. We're U2, version 2006. This is our skin. Or we're Incubus, version 2004. This is our skin. Well, okay, so you put on that skin, but in a certain sense, for people, it's the same thing. They say, yeah, you hear the same thing from a different person, and that's fine. I listen to a lot of different live streams or creators on YouTube that have very similar beliefs. I think that there's nothing wrong with that if you have the time of the day. But a lot of the people who are TV watching audiences don't have that benefit. They don't get to watch hours and hours of TV, whether it's on what's that called, TiVo or Roku or whatever. They'll only pick one of them. They'll pick the Daily Show, and then their neighbor will pick let's say Full Frontal with Samantha Bee. And the same customer will not go to 5 or 6 half-hour or 1-hour shows for the same garbage, for the same thing. That's like these late night people. They can only depend on the same audience of people to support all of their shows. One of them's got to give. I think ultimately Conan O'Brien is going to have a problem, and I think he's the most talented of them. Colbert. Who's to say if this Donald Trump thing continues through, like, let's say in 2018 he wins the midterms? Well, what are they supposed to say then? Well, what's their content? The whole premise of these people is that, he's the most unpopular president in history. Well, how are you supposed to keep sustaining that if people are seeing evidence that that's simply not the case? And the effect of these shows has been to fuel a lot of his antics. So a lot of people will start saying, you guys are making fun of him, but you're actually empowering him. And that was the case with George Bush, the Dixie Chicks thing, where they criticized him. That didn't help them. It actually hurt their careers to a large degree. They couldn't tour wherever they wanted to because people wouldn't come see them, and people did threaten them. Apparently, I'm not sure how serious it was, but people did threaten them. So, in a certain sense, your criticism empowers the subject of your criticism, and that's true with both the music and the comedy. Now, that's not to say, again, I'm not telling people not to criticize the president, whether it's the way I put out content. And I'm not overly critical of John Donald Trump. I criticize a few things of his. I probably say I'm closer to being a supporter of his than being an opponent of his. But there are things I oppose by him. But if you turn your artwork into from being just artwork into being this thematic diatribe against the president, yeah, people are going to reject it. People aren't going to go along with it forever if everybody else is doing it the same way. So that's about it. I was just talking about some of these people. Jim Jeffries, for me, very, very disappointed that he became one of these people. Again, another person, very raw, uh, kind of the same case as Eminem, a comedian, very edgy, no boundaries in his act. And suddenly, Trump comes to power. He suddenly starts criticizing his rhetoric or whatever. Well, Jim Jeffries, I mean, your comedy was all based on Nazis and people with disabilities going to whores or whatever. So who exactly who the fuck do you think you are? You're not from America anyway. So you immigrated to the United States. You have all this content where you attack Americans for buying guns. No, nobody's attacked you, actually. Nobody's come and I mean, you're perfectly comfortable in this country. If you thought it was such a problem, you wouldn't be living here. This is a guy who constantly makes comparisons between Donald Trump and Hitler, but yet he hasn't fled back to Australia. Somebody like this who has foreign citizenship already, he has an easy out. Excuse me. It's the first time I've sneezed on camera. I've coughed plenty of times. So that's it. I think a lot of this is fake. It's obviously going to not work, in my opinion. It hasn't worked so far. Has the resistance brought Donald Trump's numbers down? No, it's actually crept back up, despite all of the piling on. So we'll discuss later. Please leave your comments below, and hope to see you later.